You can now get a 30-day trial to experience The Athletic for free. Visit the link in the description below to try it now. We talk about football as we've learned to, and in terms of tactics, this means shapes. From TV commentary or apps displaying lineups in a formation to more complex looks at why a 4-3-3 can overwhelm a 4-4-2 in midfield. A team's formation is the simplest way to begin understanding how it approaches a game. And these numbers, of course, mean something. A 4-4-2 means 4 defenders, 2 of them central and 2 wide, 2 wider players flanking the 2 central midfielders, and then 2 forwards or strikers. A 4-3-3 starts the same but has 3 midfielders and 3 forwards, perhaps 1 striker and 2 wingers. And it's natural to break these numbers into something. That something is positions. Now these positions' names, fullback, midfielder and so on, come from a basic description of where they spend much of their time during a game. And some, like fullback, show how the game has developed. Originally, fullbacks were the furthest back defensively. As defences added first 1 player, then 2, they were shunted wider to the flanking defensive positions that we know today. But football as a sport has developed and become more tactically complex. And of course our understanding as an audience has grown too. Positions then, while still helpful in basic terms, are actually obscuring our understanding of how teams and individuals play. But why is that? Well, simply put, each position might ask players to perform a number of different functions. These functions combine into a role. So let's look at a few examples. While Trent Alexander-Arnold, Matty Cash and Takahiro Tomiyasu are all right backs, they do different things on the ball. In a low block, under sustained pressure, they'll be found in roughly the same part of the pitch, on the right-hand side of their defensive third, so it makes sense to call them right-backs, but their roles are very different. With the ball, Alexander-Arnold is arguably Liverpool's prime creative outlet, tasked with overlapping, finding room in the right-half spaces to bend in deeper crosses, and even tucking into midfield sometimes. Cash is a more orthodox modern fullback who gets deep into the opposition half to take on the left back and get past to deliver crosses but stays tighter to the byline. And Tomiyasu sits much deeper, almost like a wide centre-back on the right to maintain a more solid defensive shape while the Arsenal left-back pushes much higher. This creates an asymmetrical attacking structure that sees Tomiyasu venture into attacking positions much more rarely. In midfield, things are more confusing. While services like Y-Scout or FB-Ref will divide players up into defence, midfield and forwards for ease, no one would actually say that Rodri and Kevin De Bruyne have the same roles or are the same type of player. And while it's common to find people referring to a defensive midfielder, this might mean a central midfielder in a 2 who sits back deeper and has better tackling numbers, for example Wilfred Ndidi, or a creative player who likes to play close to the centre-backs and who is shielded by 2 ball winners, like Andrea Pirlo at AC Milan. Same position, totally different roles. And up front too, strikers have different roles as well. Ellen White tends to play on the shoulder of the centre-backs, using her strength and movement to find space in crowded areas to score predatory goals in the box as her team's focal point. Vivian Miedema can do this, but also drops off a lot to play almost as a second striker, stroking through balls along the ground for others to run onto. And Sam Kerr likes to pull into wide areas or make curve runs through the space between the fullback and centre-back, exploiting the space in behind with her pace and anticipation. Again, all would be classified as centre forwards, but how they play and how they score most of their goals varies widely. And the reason for this is obvious. Different players are good at different things. But we also need to find a simple way of discerning roughly between different groups on the pitch so that when we talk about football, it's not needlessly complex and doesn't obscure anything fundamental. This player is expected to score. This one is expected to tackle in this part of the pitch. This one is expected to defend the box, and so on. However, we also need to recognise that different tactical systems, say a high-pressing 4-3-3 as opposed to a blocking counter-attacking 4-4-2, ask different things of players who, in terms of basic language, stand on the same part of the pitch, some of the time. But why does this matter? Well, because it can lead to misunderstandings. Alexander-Arnold gets criticised for not defending that well, but it's not his primary role in that Liverpool setup. It means that we can have expectations of what a player should be rather than pay attention to what they actually are. And this is of course compounded when other types of lazy stereotyping are added. It also means that we become absolute in our assessment of players. They are a winger, rather than they play out wide and are expected to get close to the goal line before crossing. This means we don't take changes in system into account when judging players, or the fact that some managers want players to do things they haven't previously been doing. A manager can even unlock a player by changing their position, when in fact that's the role they've always been best at, but a shift makes it obvious. If we understand this, we can be fairer to players and managers, more honest in our assessments, and increase our understanding of the game. Now, there is of course an argument that overcomplication ruins things. The use of computer game terminology can add a layer of explanation that helps or hinders depending on how thoughtfully or accurately it's used. And no one wants to make the game so full of complex terminology that it stops being fun. The point is not to start using terms like mezzala or libero gratuitously. It is instead to recognise that players are asked to do lots and lots of complicated and different things, even if they play the same position. And these things can change game by game, depending on opposition, or season by season, depending on teammates, manager, or moving clubs. To better understand and explain the game, thinking about roles rather than positions makes sense. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic brings you the best sports journalism in the world in a personalised experience, connecting you with the stories and teams that you care about the most. There's coverage of 13 sports, plus direct access to world-class journalists through live Q&As, discussions and podcasts. Not to mention, it's all ad-free. And you can try it now for free for 30 days by clicking the link in the description.